As someone who's been playing MMORPGs for a significant portion of my life, from the Korean ones like MapleStory to the American ones like World of Warcraft, I find the current landscape of MMORPGs and live service games to be rather hostile to people like myself who just want to establish roots and call a MMO their home for a prolonged period of time. Unfortunately, it's just a reality that many MMOs have become very seasonal, have extremely predatory monetization systems, or fail to fulfill the basic checks of gaming enjoyment in either the casual or hardcore aspects. With that being said, I regret that I did not give Guild Wars 2 a serious chance in all the years it's been out, as while it seems to have its own issues, well, I'll touch on later in this video, it may very well be a great MMO for me and many others to settle in until the next big adventure calls us. And so in this video, I'll go over my impressions as a new player with almost 100 hours of playtime. If you want to give your own thoughts, or let me know what you think I got right or wrong, let me know down in the comments below. For those of you new to the channel, I have over 11 years worth of playtime in the Elder Scrolls Online, with the privilege of having served as a former class representative, giving combat feedback and advice to that game's developers. I have various amounts of time put into MMOs like Lineage, New World, Lord of the Rings Online, EVE Online, RuneScape, Neverwinter, and others. So to say I was skeptical and jaded with MMOs by the time I seriously considered giving Guild Wars 2 an actual try is an understatement, especially after having been offered Twitch sponsorships by ArenaNet in the past. It wasn't until recently, with yet again not having a MMO home, that I decided to give Guild Wars 2 a chance by dedicating at least 10 straight days of immersing myself into the base game, or core game as it's called by the players. I wanted to experience it all from the beginning, similar to how people may have experienced it years and years ago. I wanted to see for myself what this MMO had to offer without dipping into the $30 expansions, and without following player guides on the Guild Wars 2 wiki or YouTube channels. I wanted to sample all of the game systems, including questing, crafting, exploration, PvE, PvP, and more. Having been told about the original Guild Wars, I surmised that it wasn't worth trying out the predecessor unless I really wanted some sort of achievement in the successor. If I wasn't having fun or just not vibing at all with this MMO after said 10 days, I was gonna just drop it and never look back. If I did like it after the initial 10 days, I planned on doing everything in Guild Wars 2 in chronological order, including the expansions. Despite my low expectations within these 10 days, I managed to do full map completion of the entire core game, and I think the char maps are the worst for sure. By the way, I also reached level 80 of my elementalist, finished every core game quest and dungeon, soloed some group bosses, died to several world bosses, finished all core game jumping puzzles, and even killed somebody in the PvP of World vs. World. Within these 10 days, I fell in love with Guild Wars 2. Ultimately, I decided to maintain a Sylvari Elementalist at the start with the intent of making it a Weaver after having tried out the initial quests for the Chars and humans on different classes or professions like Necromancer. And before you get shocked, yes, I, a new player, picked an Elementalist intentionally, as the complexity rating for the Elementalist and Engineer were the highest, and I enjoy a challenge. I suppose this is a good point in the video to give my impressions of the Guild Wars 2 community, though it may be a skewed one as a content creator who people can interact with outside of the game while we play the game, although it's remarkable that even the in-game chats most of the time seemed pretty friendly during overnight events, and people would still help revive each other no matter what for the most part. Overall, I feel welcomed by so many incredibly nice people dropping by the live streams and in-game helping me figure out the systems or giving me advice and background information on everything Guild Wars 2. I think it's more than fair to conclude that just like any other MMO community, Guild Wars 2 has its own fair share of toxic casuals and toxic elitists, especially after someone came in to chide me for choosing to play an Elementalist as a beginner. Maybe someone in the comments can tell me what 20,000 student PvE leads mean, because I'm still not sure what this person meant. The settings and accessibility options for Guild Wars 2 are quite nice, although it could be better organized in my opinion, at least in terms of layout, which I felt like was a common theme with the rest of the UI for the game. One of the options for gameplay does allow for pretty decent action cam gameplay, which is really nice if you're coming from MMOs like the Elder Scrolls Online or New World, although it seems to me that the traditional tap target gameplay may be the better option for some things. I feel that there are definitely changes you'll need to make with the keybinds for sure to make the controls feel more intuitive to you, especially on the Elementalist, but apart from that, I don't think the controls or the game itself presents much of a barrier to actually playing the game. While it may look dated graphics-wise, Guild Wars 2's visuals holds up surprisingly well, especially in the higher settings that don't have FPS issues unless you're at a world boss event, and I've noticed that in content like the fractals, some of the details and texture for the models and environment seem more clean or updated compared to the rest of the base game. so I imagine things will progressively keep looking or feeling better as I play through the rest of the content Guild Wars 2 offers. I was also not expecting the audio design to be great either, but I think the ambience and music in most of the areas I played through were absolutely great, to the point it felt like I could just get lost in the moment, and at least for the Elementalist, the sound design for some of the skills gave me a pretty good feel combat-wise for what I was doing or casting. On the other hand, I'm not sure if it's because I only played through the base game, but I felt like the audio design for hostile enemies or even visual cues from attacks on my character were severely lacking at times, to the point I couldn't understand or tell what killed me or what was about to hit me, and it's interesting that the game doesn't seem to really give you the greatest details, even in the chat system. I'm going to assume at this point that later down the line, I'll probably need to download third-party add-ons for Guild Wars 2 to get the most out of the combat system or to improve the user interface. As for the actual content and gameplay itself, Guild Wars 2's core game actually has a lot of content to chew on, in particular for just exploring. And if you are the sort of gamer that really likes achievements, Guild Wars 2's alternative title could literally be Achievements, the game. It's been a blast encountering the jump puzzles and clearing them while also chancing upon secret locales hidden in corners of a map or discovering an unexpected way to get to an area through underwater exploration. I think the fact that Guild Wars 2 has underwater travel and underwater combat is amazing. I could probably gush in a different video for however many minutes over the underwater system of Guild Wars 2, but to sum it up, I think the little details in the game that you find with systems like the underwater exploration are incredibly thoughtful and creative on part of the developers. For instance, you wonder how you'd be able to cast fire underwater, and the game gives you the answer to that question in the back of your mind through a skill where you boil water around your enemy, which damages them. I really like how Guild Wars 2 doesn't hold your hand too much when it comes to figuring out ways to get to vistas or certain areas on the maps, and even for some of the quests or puzzles, you have to do actual math or actually use your brain instead of spamming clicks through the dialogue to get it done, like Professor Portmat's lab in the Blood-Tide Coast. And in the worst case scenario, if you do get stuck, I really do like how there's an in-game chat/wiki command to open up the Guild Wars 2 wiki on an item or something more to find out about it. Compared to some other MMOs, the fact that readily available and up-to-date information is centralized in such a source rather than fragmented across dozens of websites or content creators is such a big boon that Guild Wars 2 players may not realize. Additionally, the fact that so much of the exploration is tied in with the actual overlaying content of mobs, group events, group bosses, and more make the world feel so much more alive compared to some MMOs, especially as some of the reward structure incentivizes even the veteran players to revisit these core game areas. Some people will probably ask about the pacing for Guild Wars 2 like they have for Final Fantasy XIV. It's hard for me to say that if the playtime required to understand or to start enjoying the game itself is too much or is too slow for it to ramp up. I think at the end of the day, it will just come down to individual attitude and what you're looking for in the game ultimately, so I won't speak too much on whether it's too slow at the start or not, though I think you won't regret it if you do take the time to play it even casually. On top of all this, I think the writing or lore for the main questline of Guild Wars 2 isn't too terrible. The dialogue cutscenes are a hit or miss, though it was an interesting design choice to give voices to our characters. I felt, at least compared to the Char or Human stories, the Sylvari storyline felt more embedded into what Guild Wars 2 was presenting in lore. Finally, I'm not exactly sure after completing the core game questline how the lore with the dragons actually work in the world of Guild Wars, particularly after that incredibly disappointing final fight with Zaitan. I assume one will probably have to read up on the lore outside of the game, but before we move on, I have to again say the Zaitan finale was super disappointing and underwhelming, but hey, at least it's somehow still better than New World's writing. There's no way that's it, bro. What? There's no way he's dead. What the?
The elder dragon is no more.
We have succeeded.
I don't know about that.
Only-
Perhaps one of the biggest joys I got out of the overland experience with Guild Wars 2 was how it scales you down depending on your level, or how each map area has its own range of levels for difficulty in the form of hostile NPCs. You can actually die, which is great and a huge breath of fresh air. For comparison, much of the overland content in The Elder Scrolls Online, Lost Ark, or New World is very solo player friendly, and of course there are different nuances for each of these games, such as how ESO does it to make it friendly for any any level of Skyrim player, which directly disincentivizes forming human connections or not providing transitional bridges between different levels of content or item sets. Lost Ark specifically designs the overlay to be a soft step or regrindable process towards doing the group content where you have to learn and master the harder content, starting with a lower variant of said content. New World has an open world PvP design with instance dungeons that can't go too hard on the open world PvE content. But I think Guild Wars 2 strikes a really good balance compared to the examples I mentioned for the overlaying difficulty to ensure you can get frustrated enough to ask other players for help, which is a very important fundamental block of MMORPGs, but also not too easy to where you can go AFK and never die, thus keeping you engaged. Guild Wars 2 overlay and exploration have been such a treat for me that even during times where I felt like I'd played enough and should end the streams, I kind of just wanted to keep playing and satisfy my monkey brain and filling out more of the world map and discovering more bosses, events, and other POIs. And the fact that getting achievements filled out as well actually give you meaningful rewards is certainly a plus for me, which is why I also really enjoy the hero points and mastery systems, as they're not only tied into strictly leveling your character, but also exploring for these points to advance your character. I was thankful while I was doing the full core game map completion, the hearts or quests were varied enough to where it wasn't too monotonous at times. I really liked how you could just turn in quests without going back to the quest givers, or just start them without ever talking to the quest givers, which was a great quality of life feature that I feel like a few other MMOs could honestly use. It's important to note here that amidst all of this exploring, you really do get to have a lot of time to understand and feel what your character can do. It felt like the journey from level 1 to 80 for me was a slow tutorial for understanding more of my abilities and limitations as an elementalist, while giving me enough time to engage a little bit more with the systems of the game, like salvaging things, browsing through the trading post, learning what condition damage meant, and figuring out the little things like animation cancelling, interacting with a quest item with bar swap to go a second faster. And when it was time for me to try out the apparently defunct dungeons that no one ever does, it felt good to already understand what to look out for, what to dodge, and when to use CC abilities to make bosses more vulnerable to damage. This gradual progression especially helped me when others and I went into fractals for the first time, and I can see why fractals have effectively replaced the dungeons, as they seem to be more streamlined, quick bursts of fun. While I didn't get to spend much time in World vs. World, the open world PvP of Guild Wars 2, I feel like I've seen its twin in other MMOs right down to the sparse population, at least for World vs. World. I do plan on revisiting it in other forms of PvP in Guild Wars 2 at a later time once I fleshed out something for PvP. It was really nice to at least see reward tracks being offered to PvPers, though it's hard for me to judge exactly how much of said reward tracks offer a good enough incentive for veterans, or if the PvP population in Guild Wars 2 is as active as the PvE counterpart, though my educated guess would be that it isn't. One thing that I did notice was that it seems in Guild Wars 2, whether you want to stay in PvE or PvP, the game does seem to offer areas or systems like the fractal area or scaling up to max level in SPvP to accommodate you. Crafting wise, at first the system seems a bit daunting, at least UI wise, but once you get comfortable with that UI and understand that each character can only have 2 crafting possessions at a time that can be swapped out for another 2 later, it gets more enjoyable as you start refining and crafting things and tailoring or whatnot. Right now, probably my favorite crafting profession is cooking, which seems to be the most complex cooking system for a MMO I've come across in terms of the food combinations you can cook, alongside the amount of leveling and material hunting you may need to do in that profession. I also appreciate how, unlike some other MMOs, the gear grind to the best gear can also come from crafting in Guild Wars 2, which I would assume means after an initial amount of grinding, there's no real gear treadmill or constant regrinding of gear once you reach a certain point in the game, which probably helps with avoiding burnout as a veteran player. Since we'll be talking about the combat at this point, I personally don't have any issues with the combat apart from what I mentioned with not being able to recognize attacks on me at times in PvE, and I can already kind of tell it's a lot of zerging with hard stunts and CCs in open world PvP. I haven't run into any glaring issues yet doing either action camera or tap target camera, so it seems to come down to preference for the most part. I'm sure a lot of ESO players will also ask how I feel about the skill cooldowns as well, but honestly, at least for elementalists, the cooldowns don't really seem like they exist most of the time, so long as you keep swapping elements. While I haven't gotten to mastering rotations yet for raids, as I haven't touched that content yet, I can see it being fun, and just from glancing at the other professions, there definitely are playstyles or rotations that seem much easier than the elementalist should you choose to go with something simpler. Again, the combat combat feels greater for me, at least on Elementalist Weaver. I just really love the fluidity of the class, and I'd imagine this is the class most ESO players would like if you actually like the non-cooldown action combat of ESO. In terms of how hard it is to comprehend the basic stuff, Guild Wars 2 is pretty straightforward and not too confusing so long as you're able to read in-game tooltips and the wiki. After my initial 10 days of trying Guild Wars 2 out, I took a quick skim of a guide written on the Guild Wars 2 wiki by a player called Mazel, who had dropped by one of my streams and who happened to also be a former Elder Scrolls Online class representative alongside me. And after I read his guide, I can say that the Guild Wars 2 combat system seems slightly less esoteric than the inner workings of the Elder Scrolls Online's combat formulae and systems. There are many rewards, materials, and currencies one can accumulate in Guild Wars 2, particularly with the use of as many as 40-some alt characters, according to one of my viewers, which sounds insane when you look at other MMORPGs out there, but Guild Wars 2 seems to both encourage and accommodate an alt economy, so if you're looking for a game that's easy on having a bunch of alt characters, whether it's for farming, crafting, leveling, or fashion, Guild Wars 2 seems to be the one MMO to go to right now. With such a plethora of rewards, materials, and currencies, the in-game economy seems pretty healthy, and almost everything that you can sell or buy seems pretty relevant at all levels of gameplay, which probably helps with retaining a good portion of the community. Circling back to community, I love that no matter where you go, it seems there's always a reason to engage with other players in Overland, and after briefly checking out the guild system, I really appreciate that a deeper level of community is offered through the benefits of being in a guild, with access to a guild hall and its amenities, the amenities which include the ability to harvest or gather materials grown or created in the guild hall, which is a feature that I absolutely adore. Finally, I think the biggest attraction or reward for me personally are the mounts in this game, especially the flying griffins you can do races on, along with the beetle mounts, which have apparently given birth to entire sub-communities dedicated to racing, which is so cool to see, and one day I would love to try participating in those races. Another reason why I think the flying mounts are such a big attraction to me is because while undoubtedly there is endgame content somewhere in PvP or PvE rating that you can create for yourself as a player, the mounts that everyone's riding around on I feel like are the most visible goals flashing everywhere for newer players, which has definitely motivated me to keep pushing into the content. I think the only other thing that has interested me in Guild Wars 2, at least long term, apart from the mounts and what I've mentioned so far, is probably the amount of content expansions I've yet to do from Living World 1 all the way to Janthier Wilds, which released just this year in 2024. Now that I've talked about what I love about Guild Wars 2, there are of course the problems I have with Guild Wars 2. One big issue I have with this MMO, I already sort of mentioned early on in the video, is the UI, or user interface. The windows to character builds or some other systems just don't seem very intuitive or very well organized. Even after almost 100 hours, I still get confused on where things were or what was where when navigating through the various menus and collapsibles. I think many new players will also probably feel quite overwhelmed by the messy UI, and to be fair, while the game does attempt to help you navigate some of this with pop-ups or tooltips, I feel like as a new player there could have been a bit more of that in regards to the various systems and menus in Guild Wars 2. For example, I know that the game is telling me that one of the items I've equipped doesn't have an assigned attribute, but I can't tell which one it is when I go to the equipment loadout, which forces me to look through every one. I think also with tooltips for stats, items, or things like combo finishers, these could have been expanded upon further by the in-game menus, especially when the game keeps throwing a lot of things at you, like the different currencies or combinable collectibles, which don't get too much of an explanation either for a new player like me, making it rather confusing at times to decide what to throw away, what to bank, or what to do with things. Next, it's a shame that there aren't too many customization options for the HUD, and example being with either the size of certain HUD elements or if you want weapon skills to be in different slots, you just can't have that for whatever reason. But unfortunately, it seems some of the issues I have with either the UI or HUD may just need to be solved by add-ons. Of course, I can't not mention some of the issues I have with the monetization of Guild Wars 2, as I have with every single other MMORPG out there. Perhaps a bit naively, I asked my chat if certain things on the cash shop for inventory management were available as alternatives for in-game currency, but the answer from my chat was, in the game? What do you think this is, bro? This is an MMO. You get it in the damn cash shop. It is a bit disappointing that Guild Wars 2 has a rather noticeable level of pay for convenience, whether it's for inventory, bank space, infinite salvaging, infinitely durable gathering tools, and so on. Essentially solutions to created problems, which I'm sure a lot of people are tired of in the MMO space. Fortunately, Guild Wars 2 is not as egregious in terms of monetization or pay for convenience as other MMOs I've played, and it does provide ways to circumvent around around these paywalls with in-game currency. Furthermore, the barrier of inconvenience is low enough that you wouldn't really consider buying the cash shop items in some instances. I suppose one positive thing you can say about Guild Wars 2 in terms of monetization is that it's technically free to play with no monthly subscription fee. However, that does come with the added caveat of some free account restrictions. Apparently, though, I don't think these restrictions necessarily impaired my ability to play the core game. Similar to Destiny 2, I think new players might be a little intimidated by the amount you may need to pay for additional content and features, with the exception of Living World 1 if you want everything at once. Features and content like housing or flying mounts and so on with a price range of $25 to $30 per expansion that give such things are what to expect, though there is an option to bundle 3 expansions for $50. I can't really give an opinion here because I have not touched any of these expansions yet, so I cannot say whether they're worth it, but I would definitely say at least try out the base game first to see if you like it to further invest in it, or since I know a lot of people often skip the base game for the newer expansions in the older MMORPGs anyway, I would look into which expansion to get first and ask around and treat it as a buy-to-play game at that point. Overall, despite these gripes, I have been enjoying Guild Wars 2 and I'm looking forward to more, so at this point in time I would recommend it to anyone looking to try another MMORPG out. And that's it for the video. These are just my impressions as a new player. If you want to keep up with my adventures in Guild Wars 2 as we continue to make videos and live stream every single expansion in chronological order, with the next one being Living World 1 and ending with Gigantier Wild, definitely subscribe to the channel. Or if you also enjoy other gaming and IRL content, subscribe to support us and swing by whenever. I hope you guys have a wonderful time, and I will see you later.